Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regular council meeting of Monday, January 25th. And I just want to say we're so happy to see that some of the things were lifted, and we have a few of our salons and nail salons and stuff like that open. So I'm just looking forward to bigger and promising days. So can I have a motion to adopt the agenda of January 25th, please? Tony, Christine, any additions or deletions? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes of January 11th, 2021, please? Tom, second Jay. Comments? All in favor? Carried. And we'll move down to 5.1.1, Daryl, and we'll let you take over here, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So first up is a request for an extended leave of absence, or continuation of an extended leave of absence for Councillor Lisa Hanson-Zacharak. So as we've mentioned in the past, Lisa's taking a leave due to health reasons, and every 8 weeks we need to come back to council and get a resolution in order for her to not be removed from council. So this is week 7 right now, so we're looking for one more resolution from council to be to grant her an 8-week extension. And it sounds like Lisa has, I know she's put it out publicly, that there is some great news on her horizon. So she thinks she could be back by the end of February at council and at work. So, which is great news for all of us for sure. So.
All right, can I get a motion, Tom, please?
Yeah, I move that council extend the leave of absence with pay for 8 weeks for Councillor Hanson-Zacharak due to medical reasons.
Seconder, Christine, comments?
I had a nice talk on the phone with Lisa today, and she is certainly in good spirits. She had some relatively good news and shared it with us, and that's certainly nice to hear.
Great to hear, yes.
This motion also has places no barrier to her returning prior to those 8 weeks should she feel comfortable to do so, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So this basically is just a 8-week extension, so she can come back if she wanted to in 2 days or in 8 weeks. So
understood. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Carried. 5 point, and Lisa, we hope you get back soon because we miss you. Daryl, 5.1.2.
So thank you again. This is a request for decision for two appointments to the Drumheller Municipal Airport Commission. So there's a bylaw 33.08 that the Airport Commission has 5 members from the community at large. Currently, there's 1 vacancy in that of the 5, and 1 member's term has expired. So Catherine Bonneville is currently a member and has resubmitted her application to remain on the board for a 2nd term. And Dr. Robert Graham has submitted an application to join the board. So the recommendation from the committee, or from the Airport Commission, as well as administration, is that the 2 members be appointed to the Airport Commission for a period of 3 years, expiring at the end of January 2021 or 2024. Sorry.
Motion, please. Fred?
Certainly, I move that council approve the reappointment of Catherine Bonneville for a 2nd 3-year term, and the appointment of Robert Graham for a 3-year term, with both terms ending in January 2024.
Seconder, please. Tony, comments? I would just like to make a comment that Catherine worked extremely hard, and we're very fortunate to have her on the board, and it's nice to welcome Robert Graham to the board. So be lots of productivity. So all in favor? Carried. 5.1.3, Daryl, please.
Thank you. So this is mostly centered around the declaration of the state of local emergency for the town. But just a little bit of an update. We have seen our numbers dropping steadily. I think that overall in the province, as we've mentioned before, they kind of look at 4 numbers overall to see whether or not they want to lift restrictions. And with positivity rates, number of people in the ICU that are affected with COVID, number of people in beds in hospital in Alberta, and then the number of cases. So over the last 5 to 7 days, all of those numbers have been dropping. And so I think with one of the biggest things right now is the positivity rate is around the 5% mark, which is, that means out of every 100 people, roughly 5 people are positive. And just a few weeks ago, that number was closer to 10 or 11%. So certainly a great thing that's been going on. With respect to our state of local emergency for the town of Drumheller, as we've talked about in the past, we really haven't had to do much with respect to additional measures over and above what the province has done. I think what we had put our state of local emergency in just before the province came down with their restrictions. So it's my recommendation that we rescind the state of local emergency effective tonight, and we would send the declaration to the province if that is something that council wishes to do.
Can I get a motion, please? Somebody? Go ahead, Tony.
I'll make a motion that council terminate the declaration of the state of local emergency in the town of Drumheller.
Seconder, please. Jay, comments? Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that it is pretty obvious that we don't need a state of local emergency right now, but that doesn't mean that we still can't be cautious. We need to be diligent in our efforts of social distancing and wearing masks because we are certainly not out of the woods yet. So even though we're not in an emergency situation, we don't need the soul. I hope people still appreciate the idea that, you know, we still got a ways to go yet.
I think that, and I was going to add a couple things if I can interject here. So the state of local emergency doesn't change any of the restrictions that the province has put on. So the fact that the province isn't allowing in-person dining or having more than 10 people indoors, or they're not allowing fitness facilities to open at this time. So rescinding the state of local emergency doesn't change any of that for the town of Drumheller. It also doesn't change whether or not town hall is open to the public. Again, the province has said wherever possible to make sure that facilities are closed to lessen the impact of people having interaction with a variety of sources. So it doesn't change any of those things. It really, all it does is just on paper right now, it takes away our extraordinary powers, which we haven't needed to use because the province had implemented their restrictions on December 11th. We haven't had to use anything to do with ours. So our mask bylaw is still in effect, as it is in effect for the whole province. There are still restrictions with respect to travel, outside the province. And you're still being asked to do all the same things you were doing before. It just, there is no state of local emergency in Drumheller to add to that. So.
Jay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. All I'll add is that I think when we first initiated the state of local emergency this around, I know that for me, and I think for several of you, part of the reason why we chose to do so was because of an outpouring of requests for us to take a stance from a number of our local healthcare professionals that a local state of emergency would help them make their case for the public to take this seriously still, and heed all the warnings, and hopefully as a result reduce the number of people showing up at the hospital with symptoms. And I'm pleased to say that even though we've telegraphed this for a few weeks now that we were leaning towards ending it, I don't know about the rest of you, but I haven't heard from any local health professionals concerned about us terminating the state of local emergency And so I feel even more comfortable in doing so. And I'm glad you said that, Daryl. I agree. It's important to reiterate that this is the lifting of absolutely no restrictions, that everyone is still completely and absolutely underneath the restrictions posed by the province that superseded ours in the first place, and has everything to do with the fact that we don't believe we currently need any extraordinary measures. But that could change.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right, we shall move to 5.2.1, Darwin, flood mitigation.
Thanks, Your Worship, members of council. A couple of resolutions for your contemplation this evening, and some background information included in 2 RFDs. I should note that Albert Flutman has joined us, and he'll go through some of the outlines here. There he is. I think he's just unmuting now. Albert will be filling part of the gaps vacated by the retirement of Robert Jenkins. So Bob will still be around for the audits and whatnot as we go forward, but he's decided to retire for the 3rd time. So in any event, we'll start to move forward. With regard to the first one, the use of reserves for flood mitigation infrastructure. Over the past 45 years, or 44, I guess, if how we're counting absolutely with the new Planning Act, severance of lands for environmental reserve off of parcels that were subdivided became commonplace throughout Alberta. Certainly in the valley, we worked to that end, and for those that are adjacent to the river, environmental reserve was clipped off to establish areas that erosion could occur, riparian activity, and perhaps even some conveyance capacity. On many of those over the years, through the 80s and into the 90s, they were used to construct, by the province of Alberta, diking systems and other flood mitigation measures on those ERs. We certainly, having taken the lands from private owners through the subdivision process over the years for the purpose of flood mitigation in some part, propose that we do the same, and that we use those lands where possible to build new flood mitigation structures and measures. And in some cases, in fact, we'll be upgrading existing ones on that. So there's other public thoroughfares and rights of way, be them PULs and some roads and some land of the town of Drumheller that we'll want to use as well. So what we're asking is that there's a policy that Albert's researched along with one of the land surveyors that's attached that would be a resolution for council to consider and pass, allowing us to continue with our land assembly and put things together. Albert, can I turn it to you, please?
Thank you, Darwin. Your Worship and Council, just a quick overview of this request for decision. First of all, we're relying on Section 667 of the Municipal Government Act. It authorizes council to permit the creation of infrastructure on environmental and municipal reserves, provided that council determines that the public will not be adversely affected. This is well within council's scope of authority. Even the first couple of sections of the MGA that describes council's general powers would lend strength to this conclusion. And so therefore, if council is in agreement that the public interest would not be adversely affected by continuing to use environmental and municipal reserves and other public rights of way for flood mitigation purposes, then we would recommend that council adopt the proposed resolution. I don't think I'll read it for you. It's in front of you. It's part of your agenda package. But the benefit of doing this is that it would clarify that council has authorized this to happen. So there's no question about the legitimacy of using environmental and municipal reserves for flood mitigation purposes. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Can I get a motion on the floor, please? Somebody give me a motion to get this on the discussion. Tony, go ahead.
I'll propose a motion that, hang on here. Whereas many flood mitigation berms have been constructed on public streets, public utility lots, municipal reserves, environmental reserves, land owned by the town of Drumheller, and lands owned by the province of Alberta in the past. And whereas it is in the intent of the new Drumheller flood mitigation program to upgrade these existing flood mitigation berms and place additional berms on public streets, public utility lots, municipal reserves, environmental reserves, lands owned by the town of Drumheller, and lands owned by the province of Alberta. Whereas Section 667 of the Municipal Government Act allows for the use of public reserved lands for the construction and the maintenance of a roadway or public utility if the interests of the public will not be adversely affected. And whereas the Council of the town of Drumheller considers flood mitigation berms to be a public utility constructed and maintained for the protection of property and the safety of the public, and therefore in the best public interest. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the town of Drumheller finds the public will not be adversely affected by the use of reserve lands for the flood mitigation berms, and hereby authorizes the use of public streets, public utility lots, municipal reserves, and environmental reserves for the construction and maintenance of flood mitigation berms and appurtenances thereto as necessary.
Thank you, Tony. Seconder, please. Tom, comments? Jay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that. I don't know why there's a delay each and every time I try to mute or unmute, but it seems to happen almost every meeting. Anyway, I thank you for the explanation, Albert. Darwin, I need some further clarification, please. I think Albert phrased this as a motion that helps lend legitimacy. Is it also, in terms of practicality, a motion for expediency? If you had to come before us each and every time that we were going to place something on one of these different kinds of land uses, how many times would that be over the next 3 years?
I think there's upwards of 200 parcels that could fall within this bailiwick of public land that's not the province's, but is municipally controlled in some form or another. So yes, great point. Expediency, efficiency, but also public awareness that this is going ahead. The next motion or resolution that we discuss, of course, is getting into refined design concepts that will use a lot of these lands, and this legitimizes, as Albert put it, for us to move swiftly and deliberately to affect those designs.
I think one of the comments you're going to hear is that the communication plan that goes with those steps will have to be near flawless. I think just a recent example has produced enough concern about how easy it is to misinterpret things and how sensitive the public is, especially when it comes to the topic of environmental reserve. So while I don't plan to oppose the motion, I would actually ask Council to provide you with the majority direction that as these affect environmental reserves, that on a few of those first examples, that you expend the time to come before us, explain those ones, so that the public can start to gain some understanding of how routine these will all become and why the carte blanche was asked for in the first place. Because at the moment, I think people are very highly skeptical and their sensitivity is heightened. and to be respectful to making sure that we're transparent, that only in the area, again, with municipal reserves, municipal rights rights of way, I don't have any issues with any of those at all. But as it relates to ERs, I would like it if the first few of those came back to us just for a quick briefing so that we could make sure the public's fully aware of how this really does not affect anyone adversely, so that the proof is in the pudding.
We can certainly undertake to do that at the next council meeting and the following one after that. Certainly, we've talked about this at our advisory committee meetings.
Absolutely, yeah. So not the whole, but a couple would be great.
Yes, absolutely. And as I was saying, I think November and December we spoke about these at our advisory committee meetings, and we ended up, I think, out of cadence with a different program that is closing an ER that isn't entirely related to the flood program, and as such, we'll add the necessary effort to clarify this situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred, go ahead.
Darwin, just so we know that the type of area that you're talking about, if there's a parcel of land that's larger than what we require for flood mitigation, will that lot or that piece of land extract the land we need and then put back the surplus back into the environmental reserve?
In some cases, if it were an environmental reserve, we would build on the reserve and not diminish the land mass that's there. If it were a road, the same thing. The province and Canada would like us to designate lands that are privately held by the town or public utility lots back to ER. That may not be in the long-term best interest of the town if they choose to use that lands for something else. So on a case-by-case basis, we will look at that, but largely we will try and preserve the footprint of the ERs.
Thank you.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, Darwin, just in the communication plan with this going forward, I just want to emphasize, and we should emphasize, that this is absolutely essential for the flood mitigation program to go forward, that there are these areas that need to be used for effective flood mitigation, so that it is not something we are taking lightly. It is not something that we are just willy-nilly just going around and doing this. These are strategic plots of land that are going to be essential for effective flood mitigation. And I guess the other thing in the communication plan I'd like to see is just to make sure that we tell the public that we're not taking these environmental reserves to build condominiums. We are not going to tear down hills just because we want to tear down hills. That all of that kind of stuff is it's very thoughtful and it's very necessary.
Yes, we will certainly undertake that.
Go ahead, Christine.
And just for more clarification on our live feed here, Darwin, how many months did the environmental students work looking at those reserves, looking at the land, making sure they were not, like, we were never going to be disrupting wildlife and all of those things? So just to reiterate how much we've crossed those T's as well.
Okay, thank you. So 3 different groups I think you might be referencing. One was the Nature Conservancy of Canada. There were 6 volunteers through that program that explored much of the Badlands. 2 worked on raptors and bird viewing, and 4 others worked on assessing some of those natural riparian areas up and down the valley, including the Rosebud River Valley. And they came up with some ideas of where some rough camping and preservation areas should be in a bit of an inventory. In addition to that, we also had our student team out trying to establish an inventory of our vegetation canopy, our tree inventory. Happy to say that group won recognition by Esri Canada of being one of 12 calendar months on the wonderful work they did with GIS. So that was part of it as well. But the 4 engineering firms that we're going to speak about next, back in September, council engaged them, and we awarded various assignments to those firms and entered into contracts with them, wherein some of the first work on the heels of the public information sessions was them to do terrestrial and aquatic surveys in much of the valley that's going to be affected by the dikes. So it was that group of professionals from Carewood, Lydell, Wood, Sweet Tech, and Wood that sent their experts out and inventoried in detail what would occur at these various locations. So significant amount of work has gone into it. A significant amount more will have to go into it. In some cases, the environmental reserve itself may not be the best place to build a berm, and we may have to buy land from adjacent landowners so that we're not totally denuding or eliminating a particular ER. In other areas, more than adequate area has been taken over the years for the ER, and there's lots of landscape for us to do that. So a very big range, and I'm more than comfortable bringing back, of course, some examples of those situations through our comms strategy, perhaps through some of our videos, but absolutely to the council table for the information of the viewing public.
Anybody else? All right, well, thank you, Darwin, for that. And Albert, all in favor? Carried. All right, 5.2.2, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I'm going to ask Albert to go through quite a bit of the detail following what I just said. September 1st, we went through a competitive process prior to that to identify engineering firms that would, in our opinion, meet our needs to design and develop the flood mitigation facilities and mitigation measures. Those were awarded on September 1st. They did the terrestrial and aquatic surveys, and they've done other assignments and evaluations from rail embankments and geotech to other means. A firm by the name of Sweet Tech, at that same September meeting, we awarded them up to $300,000 to begin some work immediately. And they have started on some of their work, but have come nowhere close to that amount, and we'll explain in a little bit later. Why now? The province has completed their public engagement on their new flood study as of January 15th. And with that, we now have enough certainty that it's worthwhile investing in the detailed designs and the refinement studies that will go with that, and banging on the doors to the homeowners to start having the conversation about what lands we will need, whether it be from town ERs or other lands, or private lands that we need to purchase from landowners adjacent to the river. So with that, we are requesting that the 3 firms be awarded up to amounts that are designated in the proposed resolution. Again, keep in mind that Sweet Tech is absent there, and that we've already awarded $300,000 to them in a previous meeting. And then that we also look at the construction budget for the construction supervision process that'll go on over 30 months, where we'd like to at least flag that work and hold that in abeyance come fall, so that when tenders close, we can then start looking at work that can be completed and move forward with it. But also, we will have some early works, Your Worship and council members, between now and fall that are minor dike improvements or are improvements that are going to be necessary in areas such as the BCF, some riprapping along rivers, and more study and investigations that we'll have to mobilize some small construction forces for. So we'll need to have some budget for that. Yeah, I'm going to turn it to Albert. Albert, please.
Thank you, Darwin. I'll go through a few details with council, Your Worship. I'll try not to belabor any points there, but just to help you understand the process we've followed. As Darwin said, we pre-qualified 4 engineering firms. This is a methodology, a process that Alberta Transportation frequently uses on their major projects. The benefits here are to have multiple firms bidding on the work, and then the work gets allocated based on price and based on capacity and expertise. And rather than using one firm for all the work, this approach uses or allows each of the selected firms to proceed very quickly with designs on the projects, and that will enable us to meet commitments with neighborhoods and with landowners. We are moving very quickly, and the goal is to tender this construction work in May. As Darwin's already noted, at Sweet Tech is one of the firms that's listed. The others are Wood PLC, Kerr Wood Lidl, and Clone Krippenberger. So 4 firms. In terms of sequencing of the work, we've broken it down into two main phases. The first phase is feasibility, design, tender. There's really 3 sub-phases there. And the second main phase is construction monitoring. So the overall design and construction budget for the program is expected to be in the $20 million range. And all of this work is being funded out of that main budget for the flood mitigation works. So the second page of the RFD lays out the 11 projects that have been identified at this point in the program, and identifies the firm that's being recommended for award, and identifies the cost, the estimated cost for phases 1 to 3. So the feasibility, design, and tender part of the process. We've also identified the cost for construction monitoring, and that's really project supervision after the tenders are let and the contractors are doing their work. You want the engineers to go back and ensure that their work is being done as per their design, and to take responsibility for that. And so these engineering budgets are considered to be the maximum amounts for the work specific to these phases of the project. We're negotiating with all 4 firms. Actually, we've got tentative agreements finalized with these firms already, but there's still some negotiating going on in terms of price and who's doing, well, not in terms of who's doing what, but in terms of price. We're making sure that everyone's got sharp pencils and is going to do a good job for us. So the estimated budget for the first component, the feasibility design tender phase, is $1.623 million for the 11 projects. The maximum amount for the construction monitoring phase is estimated at $1.63 million. A note here, we'd like to get approval for both the design aspect up to tender and for construction monitoring, but reserve the award of the construction monitoring phase until the designs are complete. And pricing will be subject to another review at that point to find the most cost-effective method of allocating this required service. In addition, a $100,000 allowance from the construction monitoring budget for each firm is being recommended to be awarded now to allow them to commence early construction monitoring of construction activities using contractors already approved by council. So this would give the program flexibility. We've got a couple of contractors that council awarded contracts to last year. Those budgets have not been spent out. There's still plenty of room there. And if there's work identified that could be started before the main tendering happens in May, this would provide for some budget for that work to be supervised. So the recommendation here is for council to provide essentially an overall budget, and the program would be authorized to spend up to these limits. So the recommended maximum fee for each consultant as a result is Wood PLC at $700,000, Clone Krippenberger at $650,000, Kerr Wood Lidl at $580,000. Sweet Tech already has a $300,000 allocation from last year, so we don't need a new award or resolution on that. I should note at this point, we've identified 11 major flood mitigation projects as part of this report, there are smaller projects that have not yet been defined and will be awarded in the future to any of these 4 engineering firms based on performance and capacity. So we've got a quality control component built into this process as well. And of course, based on the value of these awards, council approval is required. Any contract over $250,000 requires council endorsement before we can proceed. And so now there is a typo in the recommendations. It says 660 for Wood PLC. That should say 700, but the recommendation is, well, actually, I'll move down to the proposed resolution. That's the best. Just bear with me for a moment here. The recommendation is that the Council of the Town of Drumheller authorize the Chief Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Officer to enter into contracts for the following engineering firms for projects 1 to 11 up to the maximum amount specified. Wood PLC $700,000, Clone Krippenberger $650,000, Kerr Wood Lytle $580,000, and that the Council of the Town of Drumheller approve a construction monitoring budget for projects 1 to 11 in the amount of $1,630,000 to be awarded when the design work is complete. That concludes my presentation, Your Worship. I'd be pleased to address any questions.
Your Worship, if I might, just a couple clarifications. Want everyone to realize that in those amounts, the 7, the 650, and the 580, Albert did describe it. We want, as I had described, a budget allowing for construction supervision of the early works, and that was the 100,000 in each of those. That's included in 1. 2 will be the tender works. With respect to the award of contractors, council did not pass that award. Council was advised that a local firm of Wyerts and Grants Oilfield were competitively selected as 2 general contractors, and we were going to do a bunch of work, early works. We did a lot of grubbing and cleaning on various dikes and vegetation removal under those competitive contracts. We would again propose that we'll stay within the limits and confines of those awards to do some of the early works this spring. And if it becomes over that 250 threshold, of course, we'll be back to council to get those awards in place. It is 11 projects of probably in the neighborhood of 25 total projects that will end up happening over time, but these ones we want to get underway as soon as possible so we can meet the commitments that we made in the fall engagement sessions of coming back to folks along the river with the upgrades. Just at the same time as this, and again, it doesn't go over the funding thresholds, but it has to work hand in glove. We've selected a ground hub and IBI landscape architects that will be assisting these engineering firms in starting out early works and those final designs to help us move with speed due to the capacity required for them. So, Your Worship, back to you to entertain and contemplate the 2 resolutions.
Speaker, I got a motion on the floor, please. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I move what Albert said.
Seconder, please. Tony, comments, please. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Darwin and Albert, the 3 and 4, if you count Sweet Tech engineering firms, I'm not quite sure why we need 3. Are they each doing separate projects? So Wood PLC would be doing projects 1, 2, 3, or are they doing different things on each of the 11 projects, kind of overseeing each other? Could you just kind of explain why we need 3 or 4 different engineering firms?
Sure. What we're after is expertise that already exists in the valley. All of the firms have a connection locally of one form or another of their staff and teams. And one of the major considerations of approving them back in September was their ability to do individual projects for us. So I'll single out Clone Krippenberger. They have experience and did the original designs, and we have the same people involved that did those designs of Newcastle and Midland upgrades following 2005. Sweet Tech did a whole bunch of analysis on our storm sewer capacity and bridge capacities up and down. So they'll work in areas that are the vicinity of that. So each will be on individual projects, generally as listed on the attached. And depending on how they perform, we'll determine how long they remain on those and what next work that they get in the overall packages. So it sets up a bit of a competition as we proceed, not only with their skills, but also with their ability to deliver on time.
Tony, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple questions here for Albert. First one was the typo that you already caught, so thanks for clarifying. It is the 700,000. And next, the recommended maximum fees that you outline there, do they pertain to the work that you've identified in the table?
Your Worship, yes, the recommended maximum fees do pertain to the work in the table, but then there's an addition of $100,000 in each case, and a rounding up to account for construction monitoring if that proceeds prior to the end of May.
So I'm just looking at Wood PLC, for example, 700,000. That would be for work completed in phases 1 to 3.
That would be for work completed in phases 1 to 3. Yes.
Plus the construction monitoring?
Plus the possibility of construction monitoring, a portion of construction monitoring, and we've included essentially $100,000 allowance in addition to the phases 1 to 3 work.
Okay, so the 592 plus the 100 is the 700 that you got. Okay,
and rounded up, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. A couple of different questions, if I could. Albert, I thought you did a great job of explaining how the pre-qualification went, and I'm glad that you explained it in terms of the 3 pillars of price and capacity and expertise. So why we're using multiples and that it's an accepted practice for large projects. I think the public needs to hear that. The questions I have in particular are about that maximum award number that you and Tony were just referring to. I'm glad he got that part in there because I wasn't sure 100% whether or not you were referring to the design phase or the construction monitoring or a blend thereof. So the only one that's left for me about that is to question is that the design phase of the work assigned to KWL comes to a total of 300,000. I understand the rounding up of 592 plus 100 plus 8 more grand makes 700K as it relates to wood, but I don't understand rounding up from 300K to 580K. Can you help me understand?
Sorry, Darwin, do you have a recollection of that? We had a conversation about that number.
Yeah, I think it's 300 for the design plus another 3 plus for the for a total of 600 for the construction monitoring for K-Wood. We have reduced some of their assignments, so we're not carrying the extra 100 for them. So that would be the total 580.
Okay, guys, but it doesn't make any sense in terms of the process you just outlined, because what you said was that the maximum award you're asking for reflects the amount that we're to award for the design phase, plus an additional $100,000 allowance so that early work can begin on the construction monitoring phase. So that'll make sense for Wood and KCB, and it doesn't make sense when we get to KWL, because now you're saying it applies to all their work. Because you're right, it's 300K on the design side and 300K on the construction monitoring phase, but doesn't include an extra 100, or I guess to be rolled in. But it's the one that doesn't fit in terms of.
Yeah, Councillor Garbutt, excellent catch. I think the explanation will be is that Kerwood has been engaged and is anticipated to continue on early works at a faster pace. We could certainly withdraw that and clarify it at a future council meeting with more detail if you would. Yeah,
Well, so if in this case it made sense because it's the lowest of the amounts to roll everything into the maximum award, but it just didn't fit with the process you outlined earlier. That's all.
understood. Yes, thank you.
I do want to understand though, just to make perfectly clear, the request for that additional 100,000 is not additional monies. It is to come from the 1.63 construction monitoring budget. It's merely to be advanced prior to that. When the bulk of that work's being awarded after the design phase is complete, that allowance you hope to allocate prior to that.
That is correct.
It's an acceleration if necessary.
Right, it's not a new 400,000? Okay. Let's see. And, well, just to, I don't know if this is meaningful or not, guys, in the financial impact portion of the motion, the money total is listed as $3.218 million. It is actually $3.252 million. If you add up 1.623 and the 1.63, it comes to 3.253 million, not 3.218.
Yeah, Councillor Garbett, your math is correct. I thought I had that one corrected.
No worries. You'll get to know me, Albert.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Occupational hazard, the money has to make absolute sense to me.
No, I do have a spreadsheet.
And lastly, this reflects about 16% of the overall $20 million budget to be allocated for, this is engineering design and then engineering construction monitoring. These are engineering firms, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Off the top of your head, do you remember exactly what the additional cost of program management is as it relates to this phase? What I'm getting at, guys, is I sure hope it's under another 9% more. I'd sure like to think that at least 75% of the budget in this area is going towards building stuff.
Right. So can maybe just offer some insight there. I think back original presentation that I'd made with some of the budgets was that the overall professional fees, or the soft costs as we talk about them, can range up to about 18% on a project of this nature, where there's so many different parts and pieces. If we were doing a simple road out in a rural area, we would probably be in the neighborhood of 10%, maybe 8% is what it would be. But as we deal with rivers and aquatics and approvals, etc., those prices increase. So for the roughly 9%, that adds on top of the existing probably 5% to date. And then there'll be additional work required of construction monitoring by particular specialists, be them aquatic, paleo resources, various other studies, hydrology, etc., that will have to happen, and landscape architects that will bring it into that 18 to 20 range of the total costs. So certainly within industry standards, we received pricing from some of these firms that was beyond that range, and as such negotiated it back within those limits, and identified the need to be within that in an economy such as we are right now, notwithstanding their local knowledge or their past history, and are happy to bring the numbers that we have.
Good point. Thank you very much, Darwin. Last question. I think we touched on this earlier, but I'd like to be reminded. Any of those three, I'll leave out Sweet Tech for the moment. Any of those three firms have what would be considered a local connection?
Yes. So KCB, Clone Krippenberger. How we identify their local connection is not through staff, but through intimate knowledge of the designs that resulted in the upgrading of the diking in Newcastle and Midland post 2005 floods. Wood PLC has 2 surveyors and a construction inspector that work in the valley and have for many years. Way back in the day, they used to be called AMAC, and before that, Torchinsky. And they do work a lot of work with special areas in the area. And then Carewood Liddell, the design engineer for them, Dagan Blakely, was a employee of the government of Alberta when the diking was upgraded in the Drumheller Valley post 2005, and was also the one that assisted us in our emergency management planning seminar a couple of years back, and has that local knowledge.
Thank you for that. That's everything for me.
Christine, go ahead.
Thanks, Darwin. I'm just looking, I know that you guys touched on this, but I can foresee questions being asked by the public potentially regarding the construction monitoring, because obviously it says in the notes here it's to be awarded later. So can you clarify exactly what the construction monitoring is and why we are including this amount in with the design amount that we are bringing forward if it's obviously construction and then design phase?
Sure. So 2 parts would be the answer to that. One is that we don't want to surprise or all of a sudden say, oh yeah, now we have to do construction supervision and bring that back at a later date. If council chooses to move faster, then we have the approval in place and can move forward. And probably in addition to that, by having this in the pot with council's approval, it gives me a little more latitude in negotiating with the firms. So the construction monitoring itself is, once we award the work to particular contractors, it's then important that the engineer's design intent be carried out and created. That is necessary to ensure that it meets the standards that we're going to have for the diking and make sure that it's constructed properly. What we are leaning to, and have not decided at this time, is to go beyond the customary, you design it, you monitor the construction, to a circumstance where it might be better for us to say on a particular program that one firm might monitor the construction of several designs or 2 designs. I'm not too enthused with the communications plan that'll be necessary if 4 different trucks and 4 different construction superintendents are all parked at the Tim Hortons trying to explain why we can't have just one of them. We are looking at that now so that we can be efficient when we get to the construction stages. There will be a lot of folks around. So that again helps us be a little more competitive, a little more knowledge base, and allow us to ensure that we're getting the best value for our product when we get to the construction implementation and the monitoring that the professionals have to do to ensure the design is constructed as designed.
All right, anybody else? All right, great questions, everybody. I guess now I'm at, are all you in favor of the motion that's on the floor? All right, all in favor, carried. Thank you, Darwin. Thank you, Albert.
Okay.
All right, we have 5 minutes before our public hearings. I'm not going to start the next one because we won't get finished. So if everybody wants to just take a 5-minute break, we'll just start the public hearing. We have to start at 5:30, so I got to follow the rules. So 5 minutes and we'll be back. And I will call this public hearing to order. This is the public hearing is for bylaw 01.21, and the presentation will be made by our CAO, Daryl, about this bylaw 01.21. I will let Daryl, you take over.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's helpful to unmute my mic so everyone can hear me and see me. Fortunately, okay. So this 0121, so this is a bylaw to essentially shrink an environmental reserve that sits on top of old public work site, or a portion of old public work site. So we are shrinking it from, I will actually show a map here, just give me 1 second. So can everyone see that map?
Yes,
So,
we can, Daryl.
okay, great. So the line that's in red is the current environmental reserve for the old public works site. So you can see that it encapsulates part of the hills as well as some area that had been used, flatlands that had been used for soil, gravel, asphalt storage, as well as some chemical storage and stuff like that in the past. So that whole parcel, including the piece down at the bottom here, is the current environmental reserve. And what this bylaw is proposing to do is essentially shrink the size of the environmental reserve to the size that is in the bolded lines here. Sorry, the bolded lines here, and that this would revert back to a residential 1 zoning. Now, a couple of points about this is that this parcel is one of the 3 parcels that the old public works site sits on. This parcel has been zoned residential 1, so single family dwellings, for a number of decades. However, it also had a environmental reserve tag onto it. And we just think it was just part of the older development. We know that it had not been used as an environmental reserve. It had been used as a public works storage yard and stuff. And this is part of a sale for seniors housing. So basically the housing will go on the flatlands in here, as well as, we don't know for sure, but most likely in here. But what we're not expecting nor anticipating is that because of the size and breadth of the hills, that anything along the hills would actually be changed. So if people are concerned about whether the hills are going to disappear and their views will change from what they have now, just because of the size of everything, we don't expect any of that to happen. Now, what we do know is that this area here where my mouse is right now isn't hills. It's actually gravel piles that have been put there to prevent people from accessing public works in the previous days. I suspect that these will be moved and improved through the construction at some point. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself because that's not what the intention of this is at all, is to talk about development of this, but merely that this is looking to change the environmental reserve from the original large parcel to the smaller parcel. So I guess just to reiterate, we're not looking to, nor is the developer looking to reduce this. I think that these hills are incredibly large, and they wouldn't make any sense. And in part, the developer wanted these hills to be able to add to the aesthetic view for the seniors housing. So that's it, essentially. In a nutshell, what we're looking for here is to be able to reduce this size from and turn this back into a residential 1 and reduce the environmental reserve to this area right here that borders 10th Avenue. So if there's any questions on that.
Thank you, Daryl. All right. So the rules for conduct for submissions, I'm just going to go through them right now, please, for a moment. And we ask that you respect the views of everyone here and allow each person their time to speak without interruption. Please begin by stating your name and if you are in support or opposed to the proposed bylaw. You will be allowed a 5-minute time limit. Council may ask questions of the presenters. Any of the questions will be brought forward and will be noted and addressed at a future council meeting. So I'm going to ask, is there anyone who signed up to speak tonight? And that is a yes, Denise. We have 2. And are there any written submissions?
There are no submissions.
Okay, so register to present in person. So Denise, I will let you read the names, and after each presentation, we'll see if council has any questions of the presenter.
Hi, I'm Tracy, and I oppose from this. The reason why I oppose is because we have a back alley here, and I live there, and we already have speeding constantly. Ever since you guys had went and made that road to be closed in that new cul-de-sac, I have all the speeders in my back alley. I have a lot more people coming into the back alley area where there has been thieves and scouting and looking in our yards. I do not want any more people around here for that. We enjoy the nature, and also that hill is a nice block for noise restrictions. We already have lots of kids around here that do ride their bikes and stuff that are in this area on 1st Street Southwest. And I do see a lot of people having issues even with the 4-way stop that we have when we got everything changed over the first place. So that is why I fully do not agree by having something there. There's lots of land that you guys already have out there. You have lots of people that have old abandoned houses. Why not start something with that first instead of taking another part of land that is actually quite awesome to look at throughout my backyard and my neighbors' backyards for the nature. We see so many deers, we had foxes. We enjoy watching all of the wildlife around here also. And I won't get any mice when things are going to get destroyed over there like I did at the other place when IGA was built on the other up the street earlier, because I used to live there when that happened too.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Does anybody have any questions of Tracy? No? Okay, well, thanks so much, Tracy.
Thank you.
John, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go next, Your Worship. Thank you very much. And my name is John Bruins. And I live on in the hatched area. Well, not quite a hatched area. I live on, let me have a look here. It's lot 39, lot 9, pardon me, at 801 2nd Street Southeast. And if you're talking about putting the seniors complex or seniors homes north, is that correct? North of where I am? Because I was thinking that that complex was going to go south on block 3, pardon me.
So if I can jump in, Mr. Bruins, it actually is going pretty much exactly where the old Public Works buildings are currently situated.
Okay.
So it would be, I guess, a little bit south and more west of you than anything.
Okay, well, that changes the picture quite a bit. It wouldn't affect me that much then, because some of my concerns were in the hatched area on your map there, which goes west of our home and south to 10th Avenue. And I was thinking that that was going to have quite a few changes in it. It looks like there's some new housing developments in there too. Is that correct? I was wondering how much of that hill would be shaved off.
So as I said earlier, I would expect almost no parts of that hill. Like that's a very significant hill. Like we're not looking to use that for fill for anything. Compared to the natural landscape. Those hills are very large. I don't think the developers plan to do anything with those at all. Except for, like, again, as I said, the asphalt and gravel piles that are adjacent to the alley. That's it.
Okay, well, those asphalt and gravel piles, it'd be good to have them taken care of with a new seniors home in there. I really don't have any other questions right now because my concern was mainly with the wildlife. Well, back in there, behind our home, we have a whole bunch of deer that seem to live back there. I was also concerned a bit about the parking and the travel along 2nd Street. I don't think that'll be affected because I was looking at a different place for that seniors home to come into. I was looking for it to come onto the corner of 10th and 2nd, and it's not going to be there, as I understand it. It's back where the municipal buildings and stuff is now.
Right. It would be essentially the development looks to be going into almost right on top of where old Public Works was. So where those vehicles came out before for Public Works or went into the yards, that's where they'd be doing it now. So.
Okay. Then that kind of puts a hole in my presentation because I was more concerned about the traffic and the problem with people breaking into places and stuff like that, because we've had quite a lot of that over the last 20 or 30 years. So when it's completed, we may have less criminal activity because some of the criminals come from that area down there. And we've had break-ins just about every year for the past 20 or 30 years. In fact, we had a few people put up a tent there and it was fully furnished with beer and everything like that. We've had fireworks and campfires in behind there, but I don't think that that's going to change that picture that much. So I can't see where I would be opposed on those facts themselves to this. I was more concerned about the speeding and the traffic and the motorcycles racing down 2nd Street at high speed during late evening and during the middle of the night, policing activities and stuff like that. So I can't see why I would be totally opposed to this at all. Finding out exactly where this seniors complex is going to be. It's only going to be, as most senior complexes are, 1 story, no basement, so the seniors can get in okay. And there would be issues around there maybe. I'm not 100% sure of that. But my concerns were under the kind of misunderstanding where this complex is going to go.
Okay, well, I'm glad you got that all clarified, John. Yeah, and I hope 55 plus aren't flying down on motorcycles down your way. But anyways, so now, Council, do you have any final comments? Christine, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just actually looking, Daryl, for just some very clear explanation, clarification on this. So the area in question that they are proposing to build this complex is essentially where there are old Public Works buildings currently standing, correct?
That's right. Yeah, so if I'm not, I could well be mistaken, but there's about 8 acres of kind of flat lands in there that are part of this. And it does have a finger that goes up into this ER area. So I don't know, we haven't seen any plans for this at all. Of course, this is early stages of it, but I would expect just from a developer standpoint, it'd be far easier and cheaper to build on just flat land already. And they had never talked about doing anything with the hills in that area, so.
Absolutely. So yes, where they're looking at going, and besides, we would see development permits and everything before they get approval to do anything like that. So absolutely. It looks as though the way that the hill is should stay exactly as it is. The way that everything is should stay exactly as it is, minus some gravel that needs to move, which is probably unsightly and unnatural to begin with, and a building basically replacing a building that's there. Correct?
Yes, I think the idea that they have proposed was a number of 55 plus single level, I guess detached or semi-attached bungalow condos, if I recall what their original proposal to us was. Of course, we have not seen any drawings of what it looks like, but it's going to be all low level stuff is what we've been told. that they're proposing. We will see through a number of steps before it actually any construction happens, be it development permits or just applications for the development itself. We will see a number of things happen as checks and balances for this process. So.
Perfect. So
I think just to add, like just the cost of removing hills and putting infrastructure in place for that would probably make the project unrealistic from a developer standpoint. So I don't think they have any plans to do anything other than kind of trimming up some of the bottoms of it at all to remove any of the hills. Again, the hills are so large in that area that it doesn't make any sense to do.
Yeah, and just as our speaker identified last there, that this might clean that area up and maybe those trespassers and stuff won't be cutting across there now once we have a nice little development there. Thank you.
Yeah, that clears up a lot of questions that I had. And as I said, I was a little bit confused as to where the seniors development is actually going to be. And so I can't see where it would affect me at all. In fact, cleaning up that would be a good thing, because over the years, that has been a little bit of a sore spot with all the activity back there and stuff like that. So I think it would be a good plan, actually.
Tom,
But then what does that do for my taxes?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, given that you've said that a lot of that parcel coming out of environmental reserve is Big Hill and is basically not developable, why are we taking it out of environmental reserve? So it seems like quite a big parcel that we're taking out of environmental reserve, and an awful lot of that parcel is Big Hill that will never be developed, could never be developed. Why are we taking that out of environmental reserve?
Good question, Councillor. I think the easiest answer to that is that if you look at the parcel as it is currently, and then the proposed change, basically the surveyors just squared off the parcel and looked at, as opposed to running, and I'll do this in my head, so running sort of a jagged line across the tops or bottoms of the hill. They just basically lopped off a piece at the bottom and created two lots, because very rarely do parcels have jagged lines that kind of match that piece in there. And so it's just simpler to make a larger piece in there. Again, the developability of it is almost zero, and they never intended to actually start taking hills down there, because there's far more, of course, Mr. Bruin's Hill is part of it, and there's other pieces of it. So, but it's just simply a matter of trying to make it easy on a surveying landscape.
So this proposal hasn't gone too far yet. There's a lot that has to be done before this happens, so there's no real timeline.
They're looking for 2021 to kind of get to the point that they would be looking at display suites or something like that. But you're right, like right now, the first stages are converting this land. Then the next thing would be consolidating the parcels. Again, there's 3 parcels here, and changing the zoning. So they're a bit of a ways away yet still.
Okay, any council, anybody else?
Thanks
What would that do for my taxes?
Sorry,
if you guys are going to be building anything over there.
Well, just off the top of my head, Tracy, your taxes would probably go down because there's more services, or there's more buildings and more residential properties to help spread the tax base over.
And what about my taxes?
Well, the answer, so I want to tell you a different story.
Houses, we can share the taxes. So this is a good thing to have more people come and move to the valley.
Yeah, but why do we have to have it way over here? The seniors don't have a lot of stuff to look at over here. If you guys are looking more for the river, those type of areas, we got nothing over here for a senior to be comfortable with.
So just last part, because I think Councillor, Madam Mayor, if you need to kind of take this and finish it off, but the answer to your question is that, so you, within a few hundred meters of this proposed development, you have few restaurants, grocery store, the largest grocery store, conveniences around there. It's actually a very good place. And of course you have, I think that if the numbers, it's around 800 homes that are all around there already. So it's not, and it was an industrial area that's being converted to residential to match the remainder of the neighborhood.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, everybody, for the input in this. Council will take the comments into consideration when deciding this matter. And as Daryl said, there's a lot of steps to go yet, so we're just kind of on step one. So I'd like to declare the public hearing bylaw of 01.21 closed at 5:51 p.m. And Tracy and John, thank you for taking the time and being with us this evening. And you're welcome to stay on and listen to the rest if you would like.
All right.
All righty.
Well, thank you very much.
All right.
I really appreciate having the opportunity and for clarification, because I was basically looking for clarification and more information because, as you know, I was quite confused according to that map and stuff is exactly where this was going to happen.
Okay, well, hopefully, like I say, I know you'll be seeing more as it comes. So we will now have to carry back on with our regular council meeting. So thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we will move on to 5.3.1. And Dave, would you like to take over here regarding snow removal?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just a point of just order here.
Oh,
So just before the public hearing, we did the RFD for consulting. The only thing was that you accepted a motion, made a motion, accepted a motion that actually had the incorrect numbers in there.
okay.
I think before Councilor Garbutt had a moment to jump in. So no one had actually read the motion into the record. And I think there was an amendment needed to be made if I'm not correct. Sorry if I am correct.
I think we had it correct in the motion.
No one read the motion though?
Oh, okay. Oh, somebody just said as Albert.
What he said, I think, was kind of the comment. So I think you just want to correct that. So someone needs to, whether it be Albert or someone.
Who was that said that?
It was me.
Okay, Tom, do you want to read it, please?
Except, sorry, the important part is that there's an amendment because the numbers are different, right, Albert?
That's correct, Daryl. Let me just scroll back up.
Sorry about this.
Yeah, that's okay. The Kerwood Lidl amount, the KWL, should be 400,000. I think it's, I'd have to go back, sorry.
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay, so can I get a motion to amend the original motion? Christine? Jay, all in favor? Carried. And Tom, now would you like to read the motion, please?
Okay, I move that the council of the town of Drumheller authorize the chief resiliency and flood mitigation officer to enter into contracts for the following engineering firms for projects 1 to 11 up to the maximum amount specified. Wood PLC 700,000, Clone Krippenberger 650,000, Kerwood Lidl 400,000, and that the town council down of Drumheller approve a construction monitoring budget for projects 1 to 11 in the amount of $1,630,000 to be awarded when the design work is complete. You're muted, Heather.
I hate talking to myself all the time. Okay, so thank you, Tom. Seconder was, I believe, Jay on the last one, or does it matter, Daryl? Doesn't matter. Okay, so I need a seconder on that on that motion, please. Jay, comments? Everybody's good?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Daryl, for clarifying that for me. Okay, now we shall move on to Mr. Brett, and you can take over regarding snowmobile and ice control strategy, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, so traditionally, the snow removal policy that comes forward every year is the same policy document and an updated map. Our intention was initially to do what we always have done traditionally on this. However, upon looking into it and starting to ask some questions, which is always a mistake, it became a little clear. Daryl and I, or mostly I, determined that it would be better for us to develop this a little bit further and make it a little bit less straightforward going forward. If you looked at the historical ones, it was a one-page document with the map attached. For this one, I've actually written a greater policy document that basically gives criteria on how how roads are assigned to the accumulation up to 2.5 centimeters, the stage 1 and the stage 2, so that when people look at this and ask questions about why is this street being done and not this other street, we can actually have a clear understanding and basis of the decision-making mechanism that led to those decisions. So that's where we came from. Now, a couple of changes have been done. We'd previously related to items as zero tolerance for the downtown business area in the downtown core. That implies a certain level of, it implies that whenever snow falls, no matter how much, we'll get equipment out there and clear it from the road. The fact of the matter is that below 2.5 centimeters of accumulation, our equipment doesn't actually really do anything. So sending equipment out there for less than that simply puts equipment hours on the equipment without actually achieving anything effective. So by changing it from zero tolerance to accumulation of 2.5 centimeters, it actually more clearly states what is being done and things that will help us make sure that we're being efficient with equipment and with manpower. And in times of tight resources, this is what we need to be doing. So upon further review of the existing ice and snow removal maps and strategy maps, we identified some other areas where we could not find a justification in any historical documents as to why certain roads and sidewalks had been added to the map previously. So that's why we've identified areas. We have since identified areas to be removed immediately and identified areas that we will remove at the end of this season. A lot of those are sidewalk related issues along the highway corridors because we can't find a documented reason for why they were put onto the maps in the first place. We have a sidewalk preservation bylaw that states that a property owner is responsible for the sidewalk fronting and adjoining their property. In a lot of these places, the town seems to have taken over some of that responsibility without a clear document trail about why we did. If the decision is that we want to continue maintaining those, then so be it, but we should be having a clearly documented reason for why we've made that decision that doesn't follow along with the bylaw. The other thing is that there are some roads in there that had previously were being done that we haven't actually done because it hasn't generated a need from snow accumulation in the past several years, and they have extremely low resident numbers. So we wanted to try and get away from what could be seen as special services being provided to a limited number of residents. So that's why this became a little bit more complicated this year and has taken us a little bit longer to get to this point. It kind of was something where we started asking, more specifically, I started asking some questions and identified that there are some things where we were simply doing things because it's always been done that way and we didn't have clear justification as to why those decisions have been made. So we're trying to get back to some transparency on this issue. So that's what has been brought forward here. So there's an RFD attached, the new policy document, and then the updated maps for the 2021 season. Okay.
Thanks so much, Dave. I just need, sorry guys, I'm looking at these maps. Can I just get a motion So you want a motion on this, right, Dave?
The,
Yeah, I
yeah.
see that. Okay, can I get a motion on the floor, please? Jay, go ahead.
Oh, that wasn't my intent, but sure. Just a
You
moment
had your hand up, so I read you.
for questions.
Okay, so somebody have the motion in their hand, ready to go? Go ahead, Tony.
I'll make the motion, moves to approve the snow removal and ice control strategy 2020 as presented.
Seconder is Tom. Comments? Okay, they're going to go, Jay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dave, you policy wonk, you just giddy about this stuff. I know you are. So instead of the 6 highlighted changes on the cover, there's actually 37 of them. And I want to talk about one in particular, because I just want to make sure, because nobody knew the answer, it's different than there isn't an answer. So I'd like to talk specifically about snow removal on Highway 9 and 51, both sides. And I believe that is a typo. 3rd Avenue runs east and west, not north, right?
Yeah, that's very likely a typo. I screwed up typing that in there.
So it says 3rd Avenue east and west to Riverside Drive, but the map actually indicates a discontinuation of all sidewalk snow removal along that highway. So having had an office along that highway for 20 plus years, I asked that question a long time ago and was told that this is a long-standing agreement between Alberta Transportation and the town of Drumheller, because Alberta Transportation plows that road. And there can be at different times tremendous accumulations of snow and ice and debris that winds up directly on the sidewalk, because there is no distance whatsoever between the highway and the sidewalk, where certainly on different sections of highway that runs through town, there's tremendous distance between the highway and the sidewalk. And so in order to make sure there's compliance, because it is unlawful for people to take that snow, ice, and debris and shovel it back onto the roadway, that's illegal, that instead the town of Drumheller clears that road, because it is a product of the province's plowing that creates the additional snow, ice, and debris on that sidewalk up and down those highways. That's the explanation I got in detail a long time ago. I would be very much surprised if Alberta Transportation denied that being true.
As I said, we haven't been able to find any documentation regarding that. If there is an agreement that was verbally done or created regarding that, and it's one that council feels is valued to still go forward, then my goal would be to get a document trail in place on that so that we can clearly have a record as to what is going on there. The basis of this is I didn't want to be working off of purely so-and-so told me this years ago type of thing. I wanted to be working from a basis that we have a clear document trail on this process. If there's something on here that council feels should not be removed and should be continued to be done by town, and an agreement needs to be put in place on that, then I will pursue getting that agreement in place. But at the moment, if someone told me to go pull the file that says, here's the agreement that says this is what the agreement was, I have nothing currently showing that. I cannot find a written record of that anywhere.
So is my information to you, Dave, the first time you're hearing it?
I have heard that before, but it's similar to things I've heard in other places on other incidents and things about the town. I have had my admin assistant look for a written record, and we're still continuing to look. I agree. Just because we haven't found something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But at this moment, I'm trying to work from things that I can bring a hard copy forward. If this is the consensus that there's a historical agreement about this, then I will have that conversation with Alberta Transportation and ask if they have a copy in their record set. And if they do not, then I will have to create that agreement from them.
Does the explanation as to why that agreement was in place make sense to you?
It does to an extent, but that same logic can be used in a lot of other places where if we are plowing a road and the snow ends up on a sidewalk, does that mean that we have to go and clear the sidewalk again? the bylaw that's in place for sidewalk preservation does not reference that at all. So I'm trying to follow what is currently in writing, because that is the legal documents that we have to follow. If we wish to go in a different direction, then I need to create the document trail of that decision basis so that we have that in writing as well.
Understand completely. I appreciate that. I hope you will, in fact, pursue that with a quick phone call to Alberta Transportation to see if they've got something in writing.
The one thing, if I just jump in, that Alberta Transportation has changed, and at least in the last few years, is they don't bring stuff to the side on 3rd or on 2nd Street West anymore. They bring it all to the center. So they actually take the snow away from the curb and bring it to the middle and then remove it that way. So that does lessen the amount of material that ends up on sidewalks, other than splashing. So they have done some changes from years ago. So that's a positive for all of us. But
Understood. Thank you.
Christine, go ahead.
So yeah, kind of along that same vein. So how, Dave, is it outlined in that document that we are going to deal with the places where Alberta Transportation does create a swale? Because over where obviously Demott Floors is, it is swaled halfway up the parking lot. So it definitely covers the sidewalk there. And I believe that the town always is removed the snow in those kind of situations.
Okay, so in that area, we will, if you notice, Demott flooring, I believe, is on, I'm just
Highway
trying
9.
It's on Highway 9 here. I believe it's actually on the service road, not directly on Highway 9. Is that correct?
Our parking lot goes all the way out to Highway 9.
Okay, so I will have to double check that. If you note, because that's between 8th Avenue and 9th Avenue, correct?
Oh, now you're getting into the weeds.
Yeah. So I will double check with Alberta Transportation if there is an existing agreement on that. And if there's not, ask them where exactly their intention is to plow that to. If we have a sidewalk right up against an area where Alberta Transportation is doing a large plow, then unless council is comfortable with rigid enforcement of the current bylaw, then that would be something where we would need to where council can direct me to create an agreement with Alberta Transportation to address that concern in order to make sure that there's not an undue, I'm blanking on the word I'm looking for here. Undue detrimental effect being put to specific property owners.
Right.
But I'm trying to, the intent of this was to follow the existing bylaw and the limited criteria that was in the pre-existing policies, and kind of get a greater level of guidance and clarity around this so that it's not such a black box decision, black box as to how these decisions were made.
Right. No, that's really good. I just was more thinking of that stretch because from Boston Pizza up, there is that sidewalk right along the side of the highway there. So that would be a problem. The other thing I wanted to say is thank you on the zero tolerance thing. That's something I always questioned and I couldn't quite understand. I always thought we'd get a skiff and the plows would come out. That didn't quite make sense, but thank you for clearing that up.
All right, Fred, go ahead.
Thank you, Dave, for that great straightening out of that policy. I see some changes in there that were brought forward by as suggestions from citizens. It's nice to see it worked in there. One of the things that constantly comes back to me, Dave, is the accumulation of snow in handicap parking downtown in areas that we're kind of responsible for. So I would, and I'm sorry, I didn't go through every small detail of that, but I would like to make sure that's included, is that we give a check over on the access to handicap parking, and we don't allow business owners to kind of shovel their snow off the sidewalk into the street where people are already having a hard time getting around, have to circumvent piles of snow off the sidewalk.
I believe
and go ahead.
For that, for shoveling onto this, I'm sorry to just interrupt there. For shoveling off the sidewalk onto the street, I believe that's actually in the bylaw. I would have to double check the exact wording that's in the bylaw on that. And I will make a note of the handicap parking spots that are the on-street ones. The ones inside the parking lots that the town are responsible for should be getting cleaned as part of the parking lot.
Yeah.
But the on-street handicap parking spots, I will make a note of that to make sure that those are getting properly addressed. And I'll make sure future versions of this map indicate those areas for cleaning.
Okay, now I would also ask, we have a number of seniors, multi-family residents, like the manors and things like that. I would ask that we pay particular attention to the roadways there. I know that I brought it to your attention down at Manor One that it was just, I know we've all been dealing with the skating rink everywhere, but that's one where we can't afford to have somebody try to get into a car where we've not totally removed the snow and ice in that area. If we can include that as well. Thank you, Dave.
Okay.
Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave, good report as usual, very comprehensive. Nice to see that we are constantly upgrading this and taking people's comments into consideration. Couple of points I would like to make is again, I think we have to emphasize to people that this policy and this snow removal is kind of, I guess I would refer to it as kind of based on an average snowfall. That if we get an average snowfall, then these are the areas that are done in this particular order, etc. But we also have to emphasize that a couple of things, that if we get an inordinate amount of snowfall, that you guys, your crews obviously do more. That this doesn't just limit the snow removal and the snow cleaning that is done in Drumheller. It can be determined by need. So if we get a big snowfall and a lot of the side streets are plugged, then the side streets will obviously still be done, even though they may not be on this particular map. So that's one point I'd like to make. Another point I'd like to make is I don't know if people in Drumheller totally realize that most small communities in Alberta do not remove snow. That they plow, but they don't remove the snow like Drumheller does. So this is a bit of a luxury that we have, and I've talked to other people in other communities about this. It does cost more money. It is very, very nice to have those so that you don't have piles of snow all along the roads and up on your driveways and down the middle of streets. So we do spend a lot of money in Drumheller on snow removal. That is not necessarily the case in other communities of our size. Another thing I would like to mention is and ask about is, so what would be the trigger for weekend snow removal? It seems like in Drumheller we get most of our snowfalls on the weekend, and therefore the snow removal doesn't happen until Monday, Tuesday, whatever. Unless it is obviously a big amount. And if you could maybe just go through that process, how much does it have to snow before you call out the snow plows on a Saturday, Sunday?
So in the snow removal maps, there's 3 categories now. Accumulation of 2.5 centimeters. Stage 1 is accumulation of, I believe it's 5 centimeters of packed snow. And then stage 2 is, let me just back up a couple of pages to find, so I get this right. I believe stage 2 is 15 centimeters of snow. Let me just confirm that.
You're correct, Dave.
Yeah. So stage 2 is a packed surface of 15 centimeters. So it's not so much dependent upon how much snow is falling right now. It is that level of accumulation. So whether it's a Monday or a Saturday or a Sunday, once we hit an accumulation of 2.5 centimeters of snow, the on-call crews and operations manager will dispatch to begin the accumulation of 2.5 centimeters of snow. Once we get to the point of 5 centimeters of packed snow, then we will start working on the stage 1 section once we finish the accumulation of 2.5 centimeters section. And then if it has had enough snowfall that there's a packed snow of 15 centimeters, we will move on to the stage 2. But if you get a snowfall on one Monday and then there's another snow and then it keeps snowing and keeps snowing and keeps snowing, we may not ever actually get off of the accumulation of 2.5 centimeters. We may not make it through the stage 1. If it just keeps snowing, the odds of us getting to stage 2 before it stops is fairly low. And if there's a snowfall and then a gap and then another snowfall, as soon as it hits that 2.5 centimeters, we go back to that first one and start again. So we may not actually reach stage 2 for quite a while because of how we've set the priorities. Now, if there starts getting into a situation where we're having a major blizzard that lasts for several weeks, things are going to have to change, and we'll be re-looking at, instead of doing the what would have been the old zero tolerance section, we would then be starting to look at ensuring the emergency access and access is available to all areas. But that would be such out of normal situation that we would have to be bringing in a special decision. Daryl and myself and Kevin would have to be making a decision that, okay, the current policy was never intended for this. We now need to start doing something else instead for this special situation. So as you said, this is based off of normal weather patterns. In years where the normal weather patterns skew one way or the other, this starts getting a little out of whack.
A couple of other things I was going to mention. So in the last few weeks, we've had lots of wind, lots of melting, therefore lots of ice. And so I know we really appreciate all of the sanding that is done. And sanding isn't on this particular map, but I think people have to realize that that is also done as needed. Now, I'm also looking at, I know a number of the back alleys have been sanded and graded lately. Our back alley is on a hill, and it was absolutely a skating rink to the point where the garbage truck, I'm sure, couldn't get up the hill. And so it has been graded, it has been sanded. And also I'm looking at 2nd Avenue West in Newcastle that isn't on the map, and it has been graded and the snow has been removed. So I guess I'm wondering also, what is the trigger to get to some of these extra areas and extra projects that are not on this particular list?
So if you look in the proposed policy, there's a category that's post stage 2 that is basically any road that's not in the preceding ones. And these ones are being generated from my operations manager, public input, identified safety concerns from GFL and from our crews as they're driving around, as well as current and forecasted weather. So in situations like this where we're finding where there's an area that's becoming a skating rink, we will try and get out there and address it. But this also takes in, part of that decision making is, what is the safety risk? How many people are benefited from it? What is the impact that it's having on the rest of our budgets for keeping the snow clear and doing that type of thing? Because everything we spend on, if we spend a lot of money cleaning the snow and the ice from the first storm in the year, we don't have a lot of money left over for the ones that come in the spring. And we have, even because our budget is beginning of the year to the end of the year, snow removal, we still have to account for that there could be a winter storm in September or October. We can't use up all the budget in the January to April window, right? So that does come into account, and it becomes a bit of a judgment call, but I have confidence in my operations manager and in my surface works foreman that they're making the judgment based on public safety and public input to get the areas that they have identified as being historically problematic areas. And we are going to try and work on those areas to, if it's a drainage issue that's causing that, we'll try and start trying to fix those in the future. But those are expensive to do in rebuilding roads. So it's a matter of identifying them and working with them as we go through.
Just one last comment on the sidewalks. We have been in a fairly unusual year, and I know a number of people in town have been doing a lot of walking, way more than they used to do in the past because of COVID, because everything's closed down. And so we who have been doing a lot of walking have certainly appreciated the town's efforts on clearing and sanding and that kind of stuff. And I guess I'm looking at cutting out the sidewalk clearing and looking at that and going, boy, I don't really like that. I very much appreciate the town doing what they've been doing and helping out all of us who have been doing a lot of walking because of COVID.
Well, with the sidewalks, where I'm coming from is if there's sidewalks that can be or should be done by property owners in that area that the town has been doing, if we can get the property owners to be doing that, then that same level of work can be saved or relocated to the trail systems and to and that type of thing. So I do agree that there are certain sidewalks that the town has been doing a very good job on, but we are in a situation in a time period now of resources, both financial and everything else, are constrained, and we should be trying to make sure that we're making as efficient use of our resources as we possibly can. And that's where I'm trying to work within the limits, within the guidelines that have been given in the bylaw for what we should be doing forward. And part of that will be to work with Erica, the communications group, moving forward to start getting public service announcements out there for come September and even during the winter, reminding people, okay, you're supposed to be cleaning the sidewalk in front of your property. That's both residential properties and business properties. You're supposed to be cleaning those. Maybe start encouraging things like snow angel programs like the city of Calgary have, where if someone knows that their neighbor is not able to, or an older individual or medically not able to clear it, that they clear it on their behalf type of thing, and start encouraging that type of thing, because the town of Drumheller does have quite a bit of community spirit, and it'd be nice to see that community spirit working in alignment with the town staff to make sure that as much sidewalk and road is cleared and maintained as possible.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody else? Okay, I just have a couple quick ones.
I think Fred actually has something there.
Fred, do you have something else?
Yeah, sorry, Heather. Just a quick one, Dave. I think Tom has a good point, and I would think that if we're going to stop plowing those, that protective services have to be an important part of moving forward with this, and that the new norm becomes clean it up before it melts and it gets ice. So I would encourage you to work closely with protective services, so that whether it's a note campaign or a door-to-door advising people, hey, that sidewalk out there that's been plowed for the last 20 years, it is not going to be plowed anymore, and it's your responsibility as a landowner, and within a reasonable amount of time because of the traffic that goes in front of your place.
Yeah.
To the side, whatever they're responsible.
Yeah, the intention is that the sections that are be eliminated at the end of this current winter season, that infrastructure services will be sending out a communication to those property owners, explaining that it'll no longer be done by the town, and that that they'll have to be stepping up for it as per the bylaw requirements. And then bylaw will be copied on that, and communication will be participating in helping me write that letter so that it's very clear, it's very pertinent to what's going on, and then we can be moving forward on that in an effective way.
Okay, so just a couple things, Dave. See Click Fix. I think that's got to be helping you guys. I see things going through on that. I just want to make sure that downtown, those ramps, like from Napier over to Royal Den, those are kept clean, because I've got some seniors on some scooters that have brought that up. Manor Street over here, 2 streets over. I'm sorry, I don't know the street. If I'm not, I can't see where it's on that map, but because of ambulance and stuff going to those manors, I just want to make sure that is addressed. And finally, are you guys still working on the status of that snow dump in East Cooley, so that talk about savings?
Yeah, my Kevin is working on that. He's been in communication with Alberta Environment on their application requirements. So we are moving forward, continuing to move forward on that.
Okay. All right. So anybody else? All right. Well, thanks so much, Dave. Appreciate it. Now let's move on to 5.4.1, Nicole.
There was a motion.
There was a motion, so
Oh,
you
yeah,
just
there
need
was a
to.
motion. Sorry, I feel like we've been talking about this forever. Okay.
We have.
We have been talking about it forever. All in favor of the motion on the floor regarding the snow removal? Carries. I think I have enough. Anybody opposed? You're opposed? One opposed. Are you that opposed or in favor, Jay?
Opposed?
Opposed, okay. All right, well, I think we had enough, so it's carried. Okay, let's move on to 5.4.1. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you. So included in the agenda with the meeting package on page 41, you'll see the updated policy regarding the Innovation Incentive Program. This was the program that we had presented back in December, and this is just the updated version of it coming to council for final review. The innovation program, I guess, just as a quick review, was brought forward as kind of a 2-step program. So there's a team initiative focused on structured program delivery, engagement with team members at all levels of the organizations, and structured reporting that goes along with that. And built into that program was also a recognition program for our staff members. A supplement to that was a suggestion box idea, just to capture those ad hoc ideas that we all have throughout the day that we think, oh, this is a great idea, but we already had our meeting. So this is just to capture those additional one-off ideas, and even ideas that we may receive from the public as well, and ensure that those are then incorporated into our regular review with our managers and our teams as well. And so that's kind of the 2-step program that we had. During our discussion in December, there was also the question, and I know this was a question from the forefront as well, is what do we look at for those staff members that are come up with just a great idea that, you know, might save the town a lot of money, or may make the town some money. So it may be revenue generating, or it may be cost savings. And could we take a further look at that? So added into this this revision is an addition to the recognition and awards. And what has been proposed is that any innovation idea that comes forward that saves the organization or creates revenue generated of $10,000 or more would be eligible for a $1,000 recognition award. So that's kind of what we put in there to capture that that space. So I would invite any feedback on that to see if we're hitting the mark, and then also open the floor to see if there's any other questions that I can answer at this time, and go from there. Hi, Jay.
Okay, before I go any further, Nicole, are you wanting a motion on this? Or are you still looking for feedback?
No, I am looking for a motion on this to be approved. So it's my first motion I'm bringing forward. So if I'm not following protocol quite right, I appreciate the guidance. But yes, I'm looking for a motion. But if there are changes that we still need to look at, certainly we can look at that.
Okay, so Daryl, there's not an actual motion written here. So do you want it like just as presented, or what is it you suggest here?
So the motion should just be to accept. So for policies, we don't always put a motion, but would be to accept council policy with the number as presented or as amended.
Okay. All right, Jay, go ahead. I see your hand up.
Again, that was for a question because I didn't see a motion, but I'll be happy to move the council adopt innovation incentive program number 302 dash or period 10 period 11 as presented.
Seconder Christine, comments, please? Jay, go ahead.
I think the revision, Nicole, is on the mark. I think that's what we were looking for. I think in terms of a larger award available for a larger scope, that's what I'm looking for, or scale of contribution. Thank you. And I just want to talk about a part of the, the rationale and read it into the record, because it's so unbelievably meaningful for me. So I summarized it when you said our goal is to ensure that we are a best employer, in part due to our workplace innovation and recognition programs. The innovation program has been developed to unleash the power of innovation to all Town of Drumheller employees and volunteers. It's only been 11 years, and I've been hoping for that sentiment to make it into the organizational culture of the Town of Drumheller. And I'm relieved beyond words that this, I hope, due to your work, will be part of my legacy. And I just want to say thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Jay.
Anybody else? Well, Jay, you can rest on that one. You've worked hard for that for 3 years, so. Well, 11, I guess. I only know 3. All right, anybody else? No? I just want to ask Nicole, so will we be updated on the quarterly reports then, how this is progressing, what's the feedback? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to, for the listening public now, we are going into a closed session, land planning discussion, VoIP disclosure harmful to business interests of a third party. And once we're done this, we will not, our meeting will be adjourned, so we won't be coming back. So could I get a motion to go into closed session, please? Tom, Tony, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, great weekend. We will see you next week. Take care.